in the meantime, we can get started. As I said, I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then I will leave the floor to Camilla, who is going to join, who's going to moderate the panel today. So the panel is, this session is called How to Rebuild Democracy After a Crisis. We have speakers from three very different countries, different backgrounds. Aziz is joining us from Berlin, but he's from Syria. Perla is joining us from Beirut in Lebanon. And then finally, we have Karol, who is who's gonna give us her background on Colombia. I'm just gonna briefly introduce our moderator. We have Camila Zuluaga, who is a journalist and a fantastic journalist and political scientist from Bogota. We're super happy to have you, Camila, here with us today. We're very excited for this panel, and I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for everyone to learn more of practical lessons of how we can rebuild democracies in countries where there has just been a crisis, or in the past there has been a crisis, and how states can build strong democracies again. So I'm going to leave the floor to Camila, and I'm really excited to hear from all of you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here with you guys, joining you, and talking about how to rebuild democracy after a crisis. And then that will be my first question for the three of you, because I don't know if in our countries, I'm from Colombia, as you already know, if we already rebuild democracies. I think we are struggling in that path, and we're trying to do so. I don't know if we have had democracy, a perfect democracy at some point. So perhaps I will start with Abdalaziz, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name okay, from Syria, and that will be my first question, and I would like to ask that question to the three of you, and it's are we already rebuild democracy, which I don't think, but how do you see that path to rebuilding democracy and to go let the struggle behind?
Yeah, so like hi everyone, you can just call me Aziz. This is here, like nobody call me like my real name, even my mom. So just like answering your question, so where I came from, like I'm from Syria, and like beside me being from Syria, I've been focusing on Syria for a couple of years. I do work on conflict resolution, leadership, counter extremism, and de-radicalization. And it's been like a thing that we've been talking about like for like the recent decades, and it's been like a bit complicated for so many people. So for me, in my opinion, before we talk about democracy, we need to talk or discuss why there are like so many countries, why like so many countries don't have democracy. And in my opinion, like the main reason of it is authoritarian governments. So authoritarian governments have been the main reason why so many nations, countries all over the world, they couldn't reach democracy. So for me, we need to start from like we need to start talking about like authoritarianism, because it's been like the main problem, and then from there we can take it. So if you look at the most of the world's problem, they were the main reason the main like most of like the world problems happen in authoritarian governments or authoritarian nations. So for me, like in order to build democracy, we need to understand the term itself. We need to tackle the main problem, which is authoritarianism, and then from there we can bring change like step by step. So talking about Syria, Syria has been going through like a war as it started as a revolution for 10 years, and people when they started they were looking for change, they were looking for democracy, and it was like one of the one of the first words that protesters were shouting for or asking, demanding for. So
Aziz,
for us, like yeah.
let me interrupt you in what you just said, because you said we need to understand first what is an authoritarian regime, and you're explaining what has happened in Syria. But then when you are living in an authoritarian regime and you're claiming democracy, how do you do it? See, it's like as a citizen, you're for democracy, but you live in an authoritarian regime. How do you building that a way to claim for democracy?
So there are like different ways like to demand democracy. So as it's happened like in the Middle East and North Africa, so it was like the or what they call the Arabic Spring, where people were like hitting the street protesting. So protesting is like one of the main tools, and right now we're living like in the 21st century. So people they've been using social media as also a platform, and like the main important thing is education and awareness. So right now people could have access like to information just like sitting with their phones and their laptops. And in so many countries in so many like authoritarian countries, there are access, like people would have access to the internet. It could be like a bit limited, it could be like controlled in most of the times, but it's still like better than countries like North Korea, Eritrea, or Cuba. So the thing, people would be able to have access to the internet, and right now people they can be educated about so many things. We've seen like so many campaigns that were based online where people were sharing their stories, sharing stuff, and that was a way to mobilize people to do actions. So I would say there are like different ways, like mainly I would say like protesting, like peaceful protests, like peaceful movements, and then having local young people as leaders. So improving or like working on the idea of leadership and empowering young people to take the lead. So we things have changed with generations, and I would say like within every new generation we see like good change happen. So the thing is more or less like focusing on those different tools and mainly protesting and using the power of social media.
Thank you, Aziz. And now I want to ask kind of the same question to Pearl, because Syria, I mean, the Lebanon, it has like a different situation from Syria, but then I'm from Colombia, and I think we have not the same situation, but we don't have like perfect democracies. We still try a perfect system if we can reach one someday. But what would you say about Pearl? How to get beyond those struggles to claim for democracy in the Lebanon, and how have you been working on it? And you as a journalist and as a colleague of mine.
Okay, first of all, good day. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored and happy to have such a thing happening today. Second of all, I'm sorry I can't put the video because we still live in a country where the internet is really, really bad. We are still at that point in time. And yes, we are still fighting for such basic things. I don't think that we're in a place today after being hit by the blast and after being in a state that is based in a parliamentary democratic republic, and it is based on confessionalism, and we are currently facing a complete failed state while we're constantly putting effort. It's been almost a year on many fronts and on many layers, and trying to keeping a home for our children to keep. As much as we try to advocate and speak about peace, and as much as we try to maintain democracy, peace never matters unless it's oppressed. Sadly, we have inherited a very harsh past, and we live among a very harsh present. We are very surrounded, mostly when you hear about Syria, when you hear about Palestine. Lebanon is a small little country in the midst of all of that. We don't hold the memory of the mistakes that have been made, and sadly, we haven't even been provided by a history book to be capable of understanding the representation that's been holding this country for all these decades. We are living in a political warfare. It's been a very long time, and today it has become very cold and really aware if I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just that we lost you for, yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah, you can
I
continue.
understand that politics today needs. I understand today that democracy needs to demonstrate what the people wants and need, what the people want and need. And today, I remember a previous prime minister being asked, "How do you see your upcoming duties?" He literally answered with pride and mockery, "It's for me to know." And democracy, you know, we're not playing chess. We need a new line of dialogue. Patronage through existential fear does not work anymore. They need to serve the people. They need to do their duties or clear out the space for whoever is eligible and credible to do so. Conditions. And we have been failed by democracy. We are a democratic state, and we're not finding solutions at this point.
We cannot hear Pearl very well because I think she already warned us that she doesn't have like a great connection, and that's why she's not joining us with the video. But I understand what you said and the struggles that you're having in Lebanon, and um, and how you're still struggling, and how hard it's to, and then you are not playing that, and that you need to do something. And let me check if the tech can help us a bit to see if we can connect you better and have because I think it's very important to listen everything that you just said. But then let me say hi to Karol, which
Yeah.
it's from Colombia as I am, Karol, and let me ask you the same question. And if you think we already in Colombia left all the struggles behind in our claim to build democracy, and how would you describe the democracy we live right now in Colombia?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Camila. I'm actually a Mexican national working in Colombia. I'm originally from Guadalajara, Mexico, but for the past 3 years, I've been working in
I have problems with
Colombia. So I work with a UN verification mission in Colombia who's following up with the peace process there. And I'm speaking on my personal capacity in that sense. So I think that in difference to some of the examples that we have been hearing about, Colombia, it's a state with a rule of law. It's a state with institutions. It's a state able to provide.
I think we're having technical problems. Karol, can you hear me? I cannot hear Karol. Someone can hear Karol as well, or not?
And I think among the main challenges that I would see to Colombian democracy, it's the way that that state reaches the guarantee of rights of all peoples. We have a state that's centralized, that's providing in terms of it's very unequal in terms of providing rights to everyone. Freedom of expression is, and you're in the media, so you know freedom of expression is sometimes follows interests, sometimes and it doesn't say the true reality of everything that's going on in the country as it should. And I think that even though I would not categorize Colombia as an authoritarian state, I would say it has some authoritarian features in a way that it can prevent people from fully participating. Example is that Colombia, it's a state.
Am I the only one who can't
Just
hear?
one of groups mobilized, but that doesn't mean that it's with all the groups in the country. Can you hear me well?
It's just that we were having trouble listening to you, and there's an issue connection with you. I thought it was only me, but then I heard that some. I thought it was only me, but Pearl then said that that she was not able to listen very well saying, Karol. Now let's see if we can hear you better right now, because you were saying
Okay.
that you won't put Colombia in an authoritarian regime, but we're facing authoritarian acts from our government right now.
Exactly. And in addition to that, it's a country that's struggling with the implementation of a peace agreement that it signed just 4 years ago, which makes it very, very hard to kind of like please and integrate everyone in that sense. In addition to that, we have a country that's dealing with a migration, and I think they're asking that on the chat. We have a country that's dealing with very significant migration flows that come from Venezuela, which has another kind of a struggle with its own democracy at the moment. To democracy, I wouldn't categorize it, like I said, in an authoritarian regime, but I would definitely put it in a country that's dealing with a very complex political situation and a peace process that's at stake. So it comes with a sort of like different scenario that what we see in Syria, what we see in Lebanon. But I don't know if that answers your questions, but
Okay, we're having problems to hear you, Carol. Let's see if you can face it, like shutting down your camera. We can have a better connection with you. We're talking about how we want democracies in our countries. Doesn't matter where we are. That's where we are connected right now. However, from my experience, and I think in Latin America and also in Europe, there's a citizenship that it's also wanting right now a more authoritarian regimes in their countries. And have you seen that in your region, and how to fight that? Because right now with the COVID-19 that just came to us suddenly at the beginning of the year, there's people wanting, at least here in Colombia, you can see citizens wanting a more authoritarian regime, more authoritarian politicians that are also getting advantage of that situation that we're living right now. So Aziz, now that I know that Abdalaziz, the only one that calls you that way is your mom, so I will call you Aziz from now on. Do you think that's happening now in some, have you seen it, that there's people, even though we know or we think democracy it's the best regime we can, the best political system that we can live in, there's people with the arriving of the COVID-19 like wanting, even though we cannot understand in some way, wanting more authoritarian regimes that wanting democracy? I have seen that here in Latin America. That's why I want to ask you that, and to see how you can fight that some citizens are also like claiming for more authoritarian politicians.
Yeah, so it was like cutting off for a second, so I didn't catch your question. Can you just say it again, please?
Yeah, of course. There's that we have an experience, or at least that's what we have seen here in Colombia and in Latin America, that with the arriving of the pandemic with the COVID-19, there's, even though we are here celebrating democracy and how we can keep democracy alive because democracy is under threat, and one of the threats that democracies have right now is that also there's citizenships that want more authoritarian regimes, that they may see, for example, China functioning maybe better than in some way the US. So they keep saying maybe we need a different political regime that it's not democracy. So how can you fight that is happening? And if you have seen it, if you have seen people and citizens saying maybe democracy is not the better system we can live in.
So it's something happening like every day in so many countries, and it's again like the idea of like authoritarian governments. The main thing that they focus on how they can stay in power, number one. So the thing like during COVID-19, there were like so many countries, like especially like some Gulf states countries, they were like promoting and comparing what's happening in their own countries with the US and Europe. So first they weren't like they weren't showing or putting out the real numbers of cases, and they were saying, you know, why the US and like the first world countries where they claim democracy and human rights, they don't know how to deal with the pandemic, and thousands and millions of people have been killed. We were able to control it because we have the resources, we are strong, and everything that they say or like the put in the media about us, like being an authoritarian government or trying to kill our people, is propaganda. So they do use like misinformation to inform or to educate their citizens or like the citizen in like about like all propaganda that they would produce in order for them to stay in power. So I've seen in so many countries they would like give like free hand sanitizer, would say we have like 3 cases today, while the US got like 10,000 cases. So we're doing like much better job. Whereas like all their democracy, whereas all their technology and everything. So it's all again like about like how people would have access to information, would have access to education, and have access to the internet or like to knowledge. So for them, like those countries, they control the internet, they control the TV, they control like what people watch. So the thing is, and then they use like punishment as a way to like to spread fear. So if you would say a word, if you would say something that the government would disagree about, they would put you in jail. They would like throw like other charges on you saying that you're trying to destroy the country or you're like building like a terrorist cell or whatever. So just to put you in jail forever or to silence you. So the thing has been used, especially during COVID, where people would compare what's happening like in their like in authoritarian governments would compare what happened in the countries that they control to first world countries, saying that democracy didn't help them. So sometimes you need to get rid of democracy in order to survive, in order to live, in order to keep the culture, and so many other things. And so many people they do believe in it because they don't have alternatives. So that's like the main source of information that they get all like their updates from every single day. And in some point, if you'd have it like over and over for years, and if you'd have like the same family or like the same people ruling or controlling the country for ages, you would just like for so many people they would just give up and they would like believe in this idea that those people were selected by whatever power, whether it's God, nature, or whatever they believe in, for them to be out there and help them to survive every single day.
But Aziz, then what you said in these countries where they control the internet, they control the media, they control the way people get information. So with the pandemic, now that most of the world it's in their homes, and we saw that for months that they are asking us to stay at home. How can you be an activist and claim for democracy when you don't have even the way to communicate through the internet or even through social media, even WhatsApp or Telegram, and getting those lists? How can you be an activist?
So yeah, so many of those apps that you just mentioned are blocked in so many countries, so that you can't use them at all.
Mm,
But again, like recently, as like more than like it's like about 2 years ago, like most of the world's population, like 50, more than 50% of the world's population had access to the internet. So right now there are like plus 50% of the world online. So then here we come up with different terms and different things. For me, I I've been like to countries where they achieved democracy as like Colombia, and I was talking with people there in Colombia, and they had no idea what encryption means. I was like talking with activists, I was reading with them, and they literally had no idea what encryption means. So I had to explain what encryption is and how to use the
mhm,
PBN, how to use like the new ways and tools where you can protect yourself. So the thing here where like the international organizations should play a role, they should provide like all this like a free ways for activists and people to be educated how to be secured enough. For me, I'm an IT trainer myself. I train about encryption, and I've trained so many activists and I've trained so many organizations, whether it's like Iran, whether it's Colombia, whether it's like so many other countries, how to communicate in a secure way. It's something important when you talk about like peace building, when you talk about
mhm,
starting a peaceful movement. First thing you need to talk about is like personal safety and online safety, because like when you talk about governments like China, they control every
mhm,
single thing. Like for them, like WeChat, the application that almost like all citizens they have to use, in order like to rent a place. It's like the credit score system in the US or your like tax return. So how good as a citizen you are, and that would be all like related to how you use like WeChat, and WeChat is like 100% controlled by the government. So like I've met like with some like Chinese activists, and they said like most of the people they don't use emails to communicate. They use WeChat. So the thing, if you would say
Mhm.
like to someone like send me an email, it's like what's email? Like we do WeChat, even for businesses and big things. So that's how like the government promoted that application so they can collect our data information and keep track of people. So like the main thing right now that we've been trying to promote among activists, that encryption is so important, like personal safety is so important, because I've been me myself, like I started as a young activist. I meet with so many activists, and so many of them are like emotionally driven, and they want to just like be out in the streets, and some of them would be like careless, and then or I wouldn't say careless, but they would miss like so many terms, or like would miss like they would miss like how important encryption is. So that's like a new thing that so many activists have been using, especially in Iran right now. So I've also worked with so many Iranian activists, and I encourage so many applications like encrypted apps like Wicker to unblock the block that the Iranian government put on them. So there are like always ways for people like to start movements, and then like if it's not like the modern new way, people they can do old school, which is protesting. So and that's what we've seen in so many countries recently.
But what you just said is a good insight that encryption it's fundamental if you want to be an activist, and that you have to set up like your IT and technical support and your personal IT safety, which in those and I think that's all over the world. And now let me ask Perla. Perla, let me ask you how I pronounce your name because I was saying Pearl. Should I say Perla? That's how I pronounce your name? Perla
Hey,
Joe?
Perla Joe. Perla Joe, yes.
Perla Joe.
Hi.
Oh, perfect.
Again, hi again.
Hi, Perla. I know that that's why you don't have the video because you have problem with your internet. But saying that having the IT safety, it's crucial to be able to start being an activist and claim for a democracy in a place, in a country where the government controls everything. So it's the same way in the Lebanon. It's the same way that to be able to do or to create a movement or to claim or to have security, you need to first of all, take care of yourself in a technological way. Is the same way that it works in the Lebanon?
All right. So I remember sitting with few of the activists during some of the meetings we had after being on the street, and we were putting just points of what we need to tackle today. Like, okay, we've ignited the streets. What do we want today? What do we need? We don't know. I'm coming from an artistic background. I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. But we do know that the most basic things are lacking today. What I do know that my freedom of expression is at risk. What I do know that we have a huge humanitarian and economical crisis that's being led and controlled by negligence. We are facing, every day we live in fear of being out of internet or being out of communication. Already the cities are like ghost towns. You have no electricity in Lebanon whatsoever when it's dark. When the blast happened, we were picking up bodies and people in the dark. We speak about Lebanon, that it was the Swiss of the Middle East and it was great and it's still holding them, but we're really in such a bad, failed state at this point. And I feel like we're way beyond talking about even democracy today. We're way beyond talking about internet. We're just really simply talking about humanity, which
Perla?
bounded by judiciary system. Yes, can you still hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
But in the Middle East, mainly, a lot of oppression has happened during the last few decades. So people have a huge problem in expression. So when you're in a democracy, as good as your educational system. Our educational system is failing. This is hard.
No,
okay.
But now I can hear you. Now,
what can I do?
And what you're? No, we can hear you now.
I just wanna take a moment to just demonstrate the separation that happened between the people and the government, even though we have democracy. Only 49% of the people voted. We have 3.8 registered voters in Lebanon, but we have 6.8 million of a population. So you have people who are being completely dehumanized in a country. And you have already half of the people who don't have a say or are not voting or have lost hope in the same dynasties taking over and in the same warlords taking over, you know. So we've been like turning in the same place. We speak with peace, we come down, we try to speak with like consciousness, to try to explain like this is the most simple, basic human right. Stop masking yourself by democracy, because today our government is masking itself with democracy.
And it's horrible what you're just narrating. Perla, but what you are describing, it's we have seen things on the media, when we have heard the radio and saw the news, but of course so what you're describing, it's really hard what's going on in the Lebanon right now. And even though you live in a democracy, it's not that way. But what are you doing, like as citizens? What are the citizens doing something? Are they able to do something, or it's just the situation is so hard that you don't even have the.
Okay, it depends. What are you seeking? What does it mean, success, to you today? Does it mean that suddenly, abracadabra, everything is gonna change and the whole political system is gonna disappear and eligible, credible people will be in power? This is impossible. It's connected to regional politics and to international politics, and many things have been solved. As a citizen today, I put full responsibility on every citizen. Today, me as an artist, I won't produce anything that's not related to the situation I'm in. I expect every architect to build every apartment in a lit and comfortable way, in a way that people don't live in tuna boxes anymore. I expect every lawyer to advocate for justice. I expect every politician each person today in the society needs to take responsibility on their duties and to be really focused and aware on how, because we are in a shifting phase. Their time is over. This ruling power's time is completely over. They are just not letting go. It is time for the June generation to take over. We are locals revolting in a global revolution, and we see it happening in many countries, and we feel it in our bones. And when one of us is hurting, we're all hurting. When one of us is prevailing, we're all prevailing. It's not easy to shove down such a corrupted system, but we are trying at least, and there is success in trying rather than failing and doing nothing and sitting in silence and accepting such oppression and such corruption and such like
but Perla,
humanity, you know.
Let me ask you, but what you just say is what you just say is very powerful, that you expect every citizen, every lawyer, every politician, every journalist to start fighting and claiming for a more stable and a less corrupt system in Lebanon. But what would you say to some citizens that think, and that happens not only there, it happens in the whole world? Why are we going to do something if nothing is going to change? Doesn't matter how hard you try, doesn't matter how hard you fight, things are going to remain the same.
We need to demonstrate what we believe in by living. Ma'am, we need to demonstrate what we believe in. I claim it. If I believe in consciousness, I put myself aware of things. If I believe in justice, I treat my surrounding with justice. This is where it starts. The bigger image will collect itself. The change has been happening for a long time, and it still needs a long time ahead. And we need to be very patient and very focused.
Yes, we need to be very patient and very focused. That's true. Karol, are you there now? Do you have a better connection with us?
Yes, still here. Can you hear me well?
Oh, okay.
Hi.
No, I can see, I can hear you. And as Perla was saying, like, we need to demonstrate, and we need to demonstrate by living in what we believe and what we want and the change we want to achieve. Now, Lebanon, Syria, it's a completely different situation from what we live in Latin America. And you have an experience in Colombia, but you also have an experience in Mexico because you are from Mexico. So we can talk like a little bit about Latin America. And I was asking Aziz and I was asking Perla about how to be an activist in some countries where the government is completely corrupt or where the government is completely authoritarian. So how would you answer that question in Latin America and in Colombia specifically, where we have a different situation?
Well, these are, from hearing to Aziz and Perla, I think these are very interesting times to be alive, because on the one hand, especially young people have the different platforms and the technology to demonstrate, to be active citizens, to engage in discussion. We cannot do it this year because we have a pandemic, but for the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen youth claiming different things, such as climate change, such as democracy, such as peaceful environments, etc. But at the same time, when we go to the polls and when we elect officials, we see radical pickups. I mean, we can talk about certain cases such as switched in democracies, just like Mexico did in 2018, just like Colombia had it a few years back, just like Brazil did it, just like what's happening in the United States as well, and we'll see what happens in November as well. We see a lot of young people mobilizing, a lot of citizens engaging in discussions, but at the same time, maybe not reflecting that so smartly when it comes to the polls. So that is very, very, very conflicting, because on the one hand, we demand something, but it's not, when it comes to public policy, when it comes to the institutional elections that we do, that's not being fully reflected. So I think that in that sense, our biggest challenge, and as Perla was saying, it doesn't matter what background you're from, it doesn't matter where you're working, or what are your roles in society. I think that we all aim for human rights, we aim for justice, we all aim for transparency, but we also need to engage in smart democratic decisions. To me, that's key. It doesn't matter how much you complain online. It doesn't matter if you have this forum or these discussions, if you're not going to make smart democratic decisions when it comes to the states that give you the possibility to vote, just like in the case of Colombia or in the case of Mexico, which are cases that I know well. So how can we shift from a discourse of joining and mobilizing and demonstrating if we're not going to run for office in a way, because a lot of people do not want to do that because they say it's so corrupt that it's impossible. But at the same time, that I think that one of the ways that we can change that is by running for office, especially young people. And another way is that how can we cooperate among sectors and not only demonizing others? So I think we have a lot of work to do in that way. And Latin America, it's not as in a precarious condition when it comes to communications as in other countries. I mean, young people here, I would definitely dare to say that do have the freedom to organize, do have the freedom to demonstrate, do have the freedom to get together and talk about these issues. We have, of course, the statistics about journalists, especially in Mexico, for example, which are very, very bad because you risk your life. But the overall young people and citizens have the opportunity to at least have a little bit of freedom in terms of demonstrating online, at least. So to me, we need to look at more deeply rooted causes and the way that we inform ourselves. Just because we have a platform with technology doesn't mean that we're using this smartly. We have a lot of fake news, we have a lot of misinformation, we have a lot of interest when it comes to freedom of speech as well, which is basic to me for the installation of democracy. So to me, it definitely relates to the way that we pick our officials, the way that we participate in public life, and of course mobilize in a way that's smart and it's effective for the way that we guarantee rights for people, especially in countries where, like Perla was mentioning, and it's the same case in Colombia, the same case in Mexico. We have places without electricity, we have places without water, even though we have a pandemic. We have 1 billion people that do not have access to adequate water. We have a climate crisis. We have many things going on that require nations to work together. And we also have a lot of discussions against multilateralism of the way that countries operate. And I speak in the case of the United Nations, is an organization that's being funded. So we see a lot of restrictions to multilateralism and countries, like taking a step back instead of taking a step forward to cooperation. So in that way, my advice, or at least the way I see it, is smart democratic elections and fighting misinformation with the platforms that we have and cooperating among different sectors.
Thank you, Karol. I have some questions from the social media and from people watching us right now. And I want to ask Perla and Abdalaziz in mostly the same way. But Perla, I have two questions. There's one that says the people of the Lebanon have taken the street asking for a change in the government, wanting positive change. What do you think the future democracy looks like? And how can we support Lebanon after what has happened recently too? That's one of the questions. And the other questions for Perla as well, it's saying that the Lebanese people are an inspiration and an example of what people are capable of doing in the face of corrupt governments. How can people across the world can support Lebanese people and the Lebanon?
Okay, I just want to go back to your first question because I couldn't hear it by the end of it.
The first question is basically.
Sorry, if you can just repeat your first question.
Yes, of course. It's what do you think the future of democracy looks like, and how can we support Lebanon after what has happened recently? How do you see the future of democracy in the Lebanon? How and there's people asking how can the international community or people from abroad can contribute or help the cause in the Lebanon?
All right. So first of all, to be capable of seeing any future for democracy in Lebanon, we have to look back at our last election and see what happened and be prepared for our next election. Because today, when the people in power say that the people voted for them, this is a false information, because I think for us to be capable just to voice out democracy really and be presented in the next election. Because at this point, we are not presented in any way. So until then, we have to increase awareness. Until then, we have to see how we can pick up the people and the city of re-understanding what are their rights as citizens today. What is the duty of this government towards them? Because they do have duties towards them, and this is still the basic communication is not yet there. So this is what we're working on at this point fully. We have communities of lawyers working on implementing new laws. We have activists who are constantly intense today on the streets, helping to build Beirut back up on its feet. We have houses that are still open. Whoever wants to help from the global community, I recommend that they check reliable and trustworthy organizations such as the Red Cross or Beit al-Baraka. I wrote it. And help a bit financially, because as you know, we are also going through an economical crisis and we have no access to our bank accounts on top of all of that. So the Lebanese today is facing a pandemic, a blast, and he has no access to his hard work and to his income and to his money, which puts him in a very chained condition on how to actually fix things, on how to stand up again. So we're losing Lebanese by the second in this country, but some of us are still here. I'm talking to you, I'm here, and I'm planning on staying here. We still have good elements in this country who are willing to keep the fight. The international community can help by keep on talking about Lebanon, keep on checking the news, keep on the social media. That's the least thing we can do, to stand next to each other, to be aware of what's happening. Today we are ruled by a few dozens of people. We are millions. I'm talking to you. You're a journalist. I'm an artist. We are millions. We really need to see how we can come together in a way globally to put the basic needs of humanity today, be it through the climate crisis that's happening, be it through the economical global crisis that's happening. I'm no longer looking between these walls. I feel like we're beyond today. If we don't save this planet from ourselves,
Perla?
really. Yes,
No, it's just that we lost
I'm here.
1 second, but yeah.
Looking around.
Yeah, but let me ask Aziz kind of the same question, Aziz. What should be done from abroad? And how can the international community, because that's also the question, how can the international community support Syria or in their plan for a free future?
So first, like I don't know if you hear me. Yeah, I'm gonna like second Perla with everything she said. Like social media is so important. Like solidarity is so important. Spreading the word. So sometimes like that's the least that anyone can like say or like do. So just like spread the words. Like tell your family, your friends, your parents. Right now there have been like so many things have been done about Syria. There are like so many documentaries. There are like so many movies. There are like so many reports. The thing is, like, I understand it's been like a long conflict. It's been like almost like 10 years, and so many people, it's like hard for them to understand what's really going on. But there are like documentaries, movies would explain what's happening or what had happened, have happened in Syria in like 90 minutes or 2 hours, like briefly explaining what happened. So like I would say like I've given up on the international community in a way, but I still like fight, and I would always still like encourage everyone to pressure the international community to help Syria and help Syrians. So the international community have helped like early in the beginning, and Syria wouldn't get into where is it right now. So the thing, the international community have the political power to end so many conflicts. But in so many situations or cases, they would let the conflicts go on in order for like an international interest, for like national interest for some countries. So the thing the international community should have reacted like long time ago. And right now, like every single day, the international community wait, like so many people die every single day in Syria. So I would always and always encourage the international community to take actions main like political actions to end the like to get rid of the regime, like the Syrian regime, the Syrian government that has been responsible for the death of so many Syrians. But again, like solidarity is important, like sympathy is important, sharing the words is also important, and then donating, like donation is so important. Like when you talk about some countries, like especially Syria, like $1, €1 could help like a family to survive for a couple of days. Like for you, it could be like something that you would spare like for a beer, for a drink. Like sometimes like you just lose it in the street and it's not like a big thing. But like for people like in Syria and other countries, like that money would like transfer into like a big thing that would help like families to survive for days. So like donation is so important, and then awareness and education. Like for us as especially young people, it's so important to be educated and aware about like our surrounding, our community, and the world, and was so in order for us to build like a peaceful world where all we can live. So first we need to be educated and understand each other.
Now we're running out of time, but I would like to ask all of you, and maybe I will start with you, Karol, for closing remarks on our chat and our conversation today, even though we have been having technical problems due to the connection. But what will be your closing remarks on this path that we're all joining, that it's claiming for democracy, for a more stable government, to fight for the system that the better we can live in our planet. So I'll start with you, Karol, for the closing remarks.
Just like we have at the moment, I think we're witnessing right now that we have global problems that require global solutions. And I think that having discussions such as this one, or panels or events such as this one, are key in taking advantage of technology to sharing some of the views that we to achieve democracy, we need engaged citizens. And we need engaged citizens with really clear paths on what they want to achieve as governments, as different sectors. And thirdly, is just I think we have a huge burden on our shoulders to fight for a more equal world, to fight for transparent institutions, to fight for multilateralism, and for effective solutions to especially peace and freedom of expression. And one of the things that I know it's not the core of our discussions here, but climate change and health related issues that we're going to be facing in the upcoming year.
Thank you, Karol. And Perla, I will ask you the same for the closing remarks of this interrupted discussion that we have been having because of the internet problems, but that it has been very insightful about what is going on in Syria, the Lebanon, and what we are living here in Latin America. So what would you say to closing remarks?
I would like to send all the love and blessings to each one of you today, putting all the effort and all the time and advocating day and night into empowering the people and into regaining the balance in this world. We have lacked engagement truly within democracy in the past, in the last election. And this demonstrated the separation that's been forced on us as citizens from the system that we live in. And it kind of made us lose our sense of belonging. And this didn't happen. Today, balance is very important. We have that's our parliamentary state. I've met the most empowering woman being elected Senate and waking up with a reverse decision maneuvering corruption. We are being And this is causing us cold modern traumas constantly. It's just that we can no longer afford to live in such condition, and having this panel is a clear understanding to where we are. And I think that, yes, we need to keep the doors open from Latin America to the Middle East as possible.
Yeah. We can hear that it was, we have to keep the doors open between all the continents and all the citizens that want to work for this path of democracy. Now, I think we're running out of time and we have to be like ending this session, right?
Yes, I don't know if you guys can hear me now. I'm sorry that there were so many technical
Yes.
issues, but I really want to thank everyone, Camila, Karol, Perla, Aziz, for joining this panel. I think we could have had so many more questions and probably stay here and talk for another 2 hours, but I really want to thank everyone for your time. I think the topic of how to rebuild a democracy is something that we will have to continue talking about, because as we've seen in many countries, democracy is in retreat. But I really want to thank everyone for joining today. I saw that Perla unfortunately didn't have a good connection now, so she already left. But thank you so much, Camila, for moderating it, for asking as many questions as possible. Thank you, Karol. Thank you, Aziz. And for everyone else, we will be back in 30 minutes with a live show. So I hope to see as many of you here. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the invitation. It was a great pleasure being connected with you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.